I've been getting a lot of questions about what is actually included in the Treeline Academy E-Scouting Elk Masterclass. What content is included? What topics do you cover? How is it organized? All those types of questions. So I thought what I would do is I would record this video and I would work through the curriculum, and we would work module by module with a very, very brief introduction to each module so that you would have a really solid and comprehensive idea of what's included in the E-Scouting Elk Masterclass. So here we are on the dashboard. This is what your screen will look like once you sign up for the course and you create your account. It'll give you access to my dashboard, which will give you access to all the courses that you're currently signed up for. It will also give you a link to all the podcasts and all the individual resources that I've put together in the preparation for this course. So you can see, you come down to the E-Scouting Elk Masterclass and you'll simply just click resume course to pick up in the course where you left off the last time you were here. That will bring us to the main page of the course, which will have the curriculum on the left. You can see we scroll down, it's got all of the topics and all the modules are here on the left, and the screen in the middle is really the content as we work through. You have access to discussions. A lot of these modules, as you see as we work through, will have various numbers of questions here. There's a lot of good information in here. A lot of members have asked some really solid questions, so don't forget about this valuable resource here. This discussion tab will give you access to all of those questions and answers. As you work through the course, the organization will be very similar to this first one. This is just a simple welcome to the course. It's a 4-minute introduction, talks about the course, talks about what you can expect from the course. It kind of talks about some of the things that will be coming up in some of the modules. The way it's organized is you'll have a video pane here where you'll be able to play that module with audio, and we'll work through that particular module. And then below, there will be a text summary. It's actually not a summary, a detailed text description of pretty much exactly what we cover in the video. So the welcome to the course is the first module. The second module is the course creator. In this module, I basically introduce myself, talk about some of my elk hunting pursuits, talk about my annual elk hunting strategies, a little bit of introduction to my life, and some of the background on really how this course came to be. Next up is the realities of e-scouting. In the realities of e-scouting module, we talk about several principles. We talk about boots on the ground scouting, information overload, we talk about statistics and the realities surrounding those statistics, and then we talk about using e-scouting as an odds multiplier, and then we finish up with the 5 traits of the most successful hunters. Next up, we have the understanding limitations and expectations module. In this module, we talk about limitations and expectations. I feel like this is a pretty important module or segment. We'll talk about limitations, not just physical. We'll talk about mental limitations, group limitations, distance limitations, terrain limitations, lots of things that need to be taken into consideration when you're planning a hunt and you're doing your e-scouting and really breaking down a hunt area. You know, you really can't have a good hunt if you do not understand your limitations and the limitations of your group. Setting hunt parameters. In the setting hunt parameters module, we talk about setting up hunt parameters that are specifically designed around your limitations. Different zones that you might want to consider when it comes to hunt planning, how to establish them and how to integrate them and visually represent them on the various hunt platforms. Developing a strategic hunt plan. This is a really important module in the course. Talk about defining the hunt plan, why we use a hunt plan, talk about the benefits of the hunt plan. And then we have a couple of downloads and some examples of hunt plans that you can take. I have a Word document here that you can download and adjust and modify and make it your own. So we spend a lot of time in this module really breaking down the hunt plan. In the next module, we start breaking into the tools of the trade. In the overview, we really talk about all of the tools, how they relate, how they work together. We briefly introduce Google Earth, Gaia GPS, OnX Maps. We talk a little bit about Base Map. We'll be talking more about GoHunt.com. I'll mention that coming up. You also will have access to download the feature comparison chart. I feel like I've put together, and I'm going to continually modify this, I've put together the most comprehensive feature comparison chart ever created that really details each feature and option within each of these hunt applications, what they have, what they don't have, who has what, who has this. So I think you'll find that very useful. Next up, we talk about developing a custom markup system. We spend a good deal of time talking about how to set up your waypoints, route identification, color coding, all types of things like that, priority level identification, the various types of waypoints using different labels. We talk about cluster identification, and then we talk about utilizing the notes feature. I find this an incredibly valuable feature. We spend quite a bit of time on that. I think you'll find that pretty helpful in this module. Next up, we talk about Google Earth Pro. You can see in Google Earth Pro that I have multiple segments, and I've continually been adding segments to the Google Earth as new things, or as I develop new content, or I find a new feature even, or I feel like a feature needs a little more explanation. So you can see this is a 45-minute module. Just the first one is. It's really detailed. We really break down Google Earth in a very, very significant degree. We talk about downloading files. We talk about KMLs. We talk about KMZs. We talk about all the settings. We talk about using keystrokes. All those features. We talk about Earth Point. We talk about using the top layers. And then we talk about just the Google Earth features. We go through all of the features. I find that a lot of guys just do not utilize all of the features that are available in Google Earth. I've added some expansion modules here since the original module was put in. How to really adjust the styles in Google Earth. How to set it up for success. How to organize your My Places. How to put folders in, put folders out, naming strategies, those kinds of things. And then I added another one here using livestock allotments. And there's a lot of great information available that you can download and install in Google Earth that will help you break down livestock grazing allotments, what type of livestock is being grazed, when they're being grazed, and who is grazing them. The last expansion module that I added was installing and organizing fire layers. I don't know that I did a great job originally, so I went back and did a very specific one because I really like the way Google Earth handles fire layers, and I liked the historical fire layers that they have going back into the 1980s even. So I added this module that really breaks that down. Next up, we've got Mastering Gaia GPS. In this module, we spend an hour and 15 minutes breaking down Gaia GPS. All the features, the ins and outs. We talk about menu items. We talk about layers. We talk about overlays, what they mean, what they don't. We talk about all the premium layers. So we really spend a lot of time breaking down Gaia GPS. We spend a lot of time breaking down all of the applications. They are pretty integral to both e-scouting and in the field work. So you can see in this particular module, we have 12 discussion questions. So if you click on the discussion, you'll be able to scroll on down. You can see here's some of the topics. PC Mac phone settings, screen enlargements using CalTopo. I don't have a module in here for CalTopo yet. I use CalTopo a lot. Slope angles, waypoint icons. Just you can see that in the discussion, we really get into some pretty significant questions, and they're pretty valuable, and I think you'll find them very helpful. So next up, we talk about OnX Hunt. Basically, at this point, most of these technology modules are focused on the desktop versions of these. I do plan to go back and add the mobile use. But remember, this course is really initially focused on e-scouting. So I really initially focused most of the modules on the web-based platforms that you're going to be using when you're doing most of your e-scouting. But I do, like I said, plan to go back and add a complete set of how to use and how to optimize and best set up your mobile version for success when you're in the field or you're in the backcountry. So again, the OnX, I go down, I talk about my personal setup, how I use OnX specifically. I have a link here to the OnX user manual. They have a lot of great videos on their site. So we spent some time breaking down OnX here in this module. Next up, we talk a lot about importing, exporting, and hunt data management. We spend a fair amount of time talking about how to move data around, how to make sure your data is synchronized between your hunt platform of choice, Google Earth Pro data, even CalTopo data, how to move that around, what types of file formats work best. We talk about GPX files. We talk about KML files. There are some very specific Gaia GPS things that make your life easier. There are some very specific OnX Hunt things that might make your life easier. Google Earth considerations, and developing a data strategy. We talk about backup. I do not rely on these application tools to store all my data. I've had some bad situations. I'm not going to talk specifically about them and who it is, but I've lost data multiple times. So I try to do a really good job of backing up my data, how to handle offline maps in the various programs, testing your downloads, making sure that you're going through a thorough testing program for your offline data. So when you do get in the field, you don't make a mistake and that you don't have something that you thought you had. We talk about mobile devices here. There are specific storage requirements, particularly in the iPhone, iOS platform, that you need to consider and make sure you pay attention to. Next up, we talk about state, method, research, and application strategy. Here we talk about strategies related to getting tags. I've dumped a lot into this module. You can see this is an hour-long module. It's got a few discussion items where we really dig into states. We talk about how to select units. I talk a little bit about my personal theory, how I go about the process, how to plan for year-to-year tags, and then maybe some long-term strategies for maybe some of these what they call glory tags or really hard to draw tags. We talk a little about point creep. Of course, it always comes back around to actually getting tags. So I did add a module for that. It's pretty comprehensive. I talk about the various platforms that you can use for your planning. You know, the ones I personally use, GoHunt.com, TopRed.com, all the various hunt planners that are available with links to all of them, all the harvest data with links to all the harvest data, population objectives, management reports. All of these reports, I've made it easy for you to access them with links, and I'll continue to update them. The next module is the basic needs of elk. In this module, I try to break down the basic needs of elk from season to season and what the elk tend to want to key on and not key on. I think that a good understanding of the basic needs of elk is really important. If you're going to really go to next level e-scouting, you really got to understand what the elk are looking for in terms of their needs, from food, security, the rut, all those things and how they relate. Next up is identifying the core hunting areas. So when it comes to identifying core hunting areas, these are basically the backbone of your hunt plan. You're going to want to find and identify multiple hunt areas that you can incorporate into your hunt plan. In this module, we start breaking that down. We spend 30 minutes in this module really defining hunt areas, what a hunt area is, what it's not. We talk about hunter pressure and hunter population in particular areas, access points, weather, the physical demands, the topography of the unit, the elevation changes, all these things that go into hunt areas, and some of the pitfalls that you can find and run into when you start navigating this area and you start trying to prepare and break down these hunt areas. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of different topics here in this module. You can see there's a lot of information here. So in the zones of pressure module, we start breaking down how to break down these hunt areas and look at where the pressure is coming from, where it's likely to come from, where it's likely to not come from. Pressure is a real key with elk. Elk will try to avoid pressure when they can. And at certain times of the year, they do it more than other times of the year. So all those factors are discussed in this module. We break down the methods. I break down the techniques that I use. I'm kind of an old school guy. I like to lay the maps out in front of me. I like to see it. I like to see it develop. We talk about how we do that with the actual National Forest maps. You can do it digitally. It can be done, and I'm working on a module for that. But I still really like those National Forest maps, laying them out on the table, getting the big picture view. I talk about that in a lot of podcasts that I've been on. Access point evaluation. We talk about private land borders, how to work those, how to organize those. Looking at trail pressure. We talked about hunt parameters in a previous module. In this module, we talk about integrating that hunt parameter limitation into your zones of pressure so that you're really looking at areas that are within your reach or within your capabilities as both an individual hunter and or as a group of hunters. Next, we break into the elk finding concepts. So in this first module, I spent some time, 16 minutes in this video, just introducing all of the concepts, all of the elk finding concepts and how they work together. Next, we get into the individual elk finding concepts. The first one we break into is evaluating access points and established trail use. In this module, we spend 30 minutes really breaking down access points, trail use, and how to evaluate the pressure on those. Is an area getting a lot of pressure? Is it getting relatively little pressure? There's ways to do that, and there's a lot of really solid techniques that you can integrate into your strategy to help you break down these areas. And in this video, try to do that. In the next one, we start breaking down meadows and feeding zones. In this 40-minute video, we start to break down meadows and feeding zones very specifically, how they relate. I've got 10 meadow rules when I'm planning my hunts and I'm looking at Meadows, I've got 10 rules that I work through. We start looking at examples. In all the previous modules, we've been looking at theory and principles. And that's no different in these elk finding concept modules, except for the fact that we do the theory and the principles first, and then we break into actual examples. In the examples, we really break those down and we look at all the features. We break them down. We talk about the goods and the bads, what we like about these areas. And I always try to include multiple examples. For in this example, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meadow breakdowns. Next up, we have canyon, creeks, and drainages. Same format here. You can see we've got the video, which is 40 minutes. So you can see we've got 7 discussion items here in this module. In this module, we go through canyons, creeks, and drainages. What separates them, what makes one more preferred over the other, what basin, why these certain basins are more attractive to elk than others. And then again, we go through examples where we look at the slopes, we look at the canyons, we look at the drainages, and we talk about them one by one and really spend a great deal of time trying to give you good, usable information. 3, 4, 5, 6 examples in the canyon, creeks, and drainages. So next up is the fires and logging. This is where I start breaking them up into parts because the modules here are getting a little bit longer, a little bit bigger. So I started breaking them into 2 parts. The first part is a strategy and theory, and then the second part are working examples. So in this particular one, this is fire zones and timber logging areas. A lot to talk about here. I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts. Edge habitats, going all through all the key features of fires and timbered areas, how to really maximize the layers and the different tools. And then in the examples, 54 minutes of fire zones and logging areas examples. So I think you can start to see how comprehensive some of these modules are. Next up is beetle kills and sparse timber areas. So beetle kills are another one of my favorite areas to hunt elk, but they are not all created equal. So part 1 is the theory and principles, breaking down beetle kills, research and background on them, how to age them, the different stages and the different cycles of beetle kills, how to identify those using aerial photos, what means what, the color coding, beetle kills, all the things that go into that. So I think you'll find a lot of great things here. In the second part, we basically start breaking down those examples. We spent almost an hour breaking down beetle kills and sparse timber areas and how they relate to elk finding and how we incorporate those into our hunt plan. Next up is benches and slope evaluation. Part 1, again, is the theory behind it. We talk about what our bench is. We talk about benches and e-scouting. We talk about all these different bench allocated. We talk about slopes. What slopes are attractive to elk, what slopes are not. Pressured elk. We talk about mesas a little. In Colorado, there's a lot of mesa country, and I've spent a lot of time hunting the mesa country in Colorado, so I break some of that down. So we go into the examples in part 2, almost an hour, breaking down benches. In this module, we talk about saddles, funnels, and travel corridors. We talk about how to identify prime saddles, funnel areas, and travel corridors that elk will use as they move from area to area. Text goes along with the video. And then we have part 2 again, which is an example review. We spend 45 minutes going through saddles, funnels, and travel corridors. Glassing identification. Glassing location identification is probably one of my favorite modules in the course. I spent a lot of time on this particular module researching and really breaking down how to identify great glassing spots. There's a lot of strategy here. It's not as simple as looking on the topography map. Oh, there's a hill over here. I'm going to get on top of that hill and I'm going to look over there and I'm going to find some elk. There's sun directions. There's view sheds. The slope has a lot of effect on what you can see and not see. So understanding the slope is important when it comes to glassing. What you can see from certain spots, 360 degrees, taking in sun considerations. All these things are really important. We talk about Google Earth Pro. When it comes to glassing identification, it's the gold standard. We talk about doing measurements, and we talk about how accurate Google Earth really is and how accurate these hunt applications are when it comes to measuring routes and paths. We talk about the view shed tools. We talk about slope conversions from percent to degrees. I give you some links that you can use for that as well. Next up is the examples. We spend, again, almost an hour going through multiple examples of glassing location, route planning, all the strategy that goes into, really working through glassing locations and identifying these locations, having them in your arsenal before you get on your hunt. The next module in the course is the late season elk hunting tactics and strategies. Most of this course is centered around archery elk season. A lot of the other modules really are valuable and useful for all seasons of your elk hunting pursuits. I wanted to add one specific module for late season, and so that's what I did here. In part one, we really go through some introductions. We talk about the rut cycle. We talk about a lot of cold and snow considerations. We talk about migration. We talk about a lot of resources and a lot of links to those things. In part two, we continue on. We talk about some features. We talk about south slopes and late season basins and bowls and edge environments, remote benches, sparse timber areas, saddles, funnels. We just talk about a lot of information in the late season. Part three, we continue on using the snow analysis, using the specific layers in some of the different hunt applications, using them in the field. And lastly, we have a webinars and resources module. This particular module will continue to grow as I develop and add more resources to the course. Anything that I add from any live webinar that I do will be added here. Any podcast that I do will be added to that podcast resources link, so it's available. So that pretty much wraps up the E-Scouting Elk Masterclass. I wanted to put this out there so that you have a chance to run through the content of this course. I hope you found that information useful. I hope you have a better understanding of what the E-Scouting Elk Masterclass is all about, and I hope you'll check it out at treelineacademy.net.